Hey, don't do ministry alone. This is practically pastoring.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Practically Pastoring. We got the whole gang here from Baltimore, South Carolina, and here in the beautiful Tampa Bay area. We've got two questions today that both come from our Facebook group. So if you are not in the Facebook group, what are you waiting for? Now is your chance to plug in and ask some anonymous questions that we might go ahead and address here on the show. Our first question comes from a lead pastor who inherited a worship leader. And after 8 months, he is convinced that the chemistry just isn't there. The worship pastor pushes back constantly. They have different philosophies of ministry. And now volunteers are starting to express frustration as well. The lead pastor thinks that it might be time to let him go, but the issue is not a competency issue. Then in the second half of the show, we have almost an opposite issue. We have a younger part-time worship leader on staff who is talented, well-liked, doing a good job on Sundays, but struggles with communications, meetings, plannings, and leadership outside the platform. I'm pretty sure that's just all worship leaders, right, Jeff?
100%.
I was going to I get
Where's the problem? Where's the oddity here?
So today we are talking about when chemistry becomes a legitimate staffing issue, when coaching is still the right answer, and how to avoid firing somebody for things you never communicated that were important. So here we go. First question.
Classic.
I've been the lead pastor for 12. I have been a lead pastor for 12 years. I've been at my current church for 8 months. The current church is around 130 people. Also, quick pause. If you're calling your current wife, that's usually an issue. If you're calling your current church, that's like hang on, wait a second. It's your church.
I feel like under a year, though, that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Okay. And again, if you've had multiple wives, I guess you can call your under a year wife.
My most recent wife.
My most recent wife, yes. I inherited the two other staff members. I've tried making it work. Oh, I'm sorry. Our current staff is me, youth and kids pastor, and worship pastor. I inherited the two other staff members. I've tried to make it work with the worship pastor, but we just don't have good chemistry. I don't think it could improve with time. We have some fundamental differences in philosophy of ministry and philosophy of worship. He pushes back constantly whenever I ask him to do something or something differently. I'm tired of his attitude. If I believe I need to let him go, how do I go about doing that? What sort of timing? I've only had to let one other staff member go before at a previous church. In the other case, that was more of a competency issue. This is different because I wouldn't be letting him go due to poor job performance, but more because we don't have good chemistry and we see things differently. I have recently received feedback from a number of his volunteers that they are frustrated too with him. I appreciate the advice. Thanks. So, nothing like a fun, easy topic to get us started. I think the first question has to be whether this is actually a chemistry problem, because we don't have chemistry can mean a whole lot of different things. It can mean we have different personalities. We have a different view of leadership. He doesn't respond to my authority. It can mean we fundamentally disagree on what worship ministry is and what it should accomplish. And it can also mean I came to the church 8 months ago and expected to inherit staff members who immediately operated the way that I would want someone that I hired to operate, and that's not the case. So all of these issues are not the same issue, and they're not all the same problem. I think 8 months is enough time to see some patterns and to see some issues, but it's still important to distinguish between personal frustration from true philosophical incompatibility, if that makes any sense. I don't know that 8 months is really long enough to gauge that completely. I think the repeated pushback is probably more significant than the perceived chemistry or lack thereof. It's not so much whether or not they enjoy working each other or whether or not they want to hang out on Saturday. It's the pushback is kind of where the red flag is for me. And if every request turns into resistance, then that's going to become a real team function issue going forward, I think. So I also think that the volunteer feedback is pretty important, because if it was just you and everybody else this is the greatest guy we've ever had in this role, how could it get any better? Well, then you might just need to swallow some ego. So gentlemen, what are your thoughts? I think the pastor should be able to clearly explain whether the issue is attitude, insubordination, philosophy, leadership, communication, culture fit, or some combination of them. But I think it needs to be clearly articulated. So Tim, you guys have recently had some staff change there in Lakeview land. you have had to move off of former worship leaders for similar issues? When does bad chemistry become a legitimate reason for making a staff change?
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple of things at play here. I will say, like, the most recent staff changes at Lakeview were not due to chemistry issues.
No.
Where we planted a church and we had open hands and sent a few people out. Yeah. Now previous staff members, sure, there might have been some chemistry issues there. Now with this particular question, I think I would just have some follow-ups. Is this like a healthy resistance or a chronic resistance, right? Or is there just some disagreement here? Like, there can be healthy disagreement. I was interviewing someone recently and she said, am I allowed to disagree with you from time to time? I'm like, what kind of course, like, it would be silly if you didn't. And she's like, well, backstory, at the previous church I worked at, it was well known amongst the staff, if there was disagreement with the senior pastor, your position on staff wouldn't last very long. Like that's a very unhealthy staff culture. There needs to be room for disagreement. But if you're like in a pattern of chronic resistance, that's going to wear everyone in the room down. Like a healthy staff culture, you can push back, you can ask questions, you can disagree. But just as it is, hopefully with all of our elder meetings, once a decision is made, we're all able to support that decision moving forward. We might not have agreed in that meeting with that decision, but once it's made as a team, we're all moving forward with that. Now, church of 130 people, worship pastor fundamentally disagrees with potentially the lead pastor's philosophy of worship. Guys, that's a major problem. Like, you're going to have to work through this. I might even sit down with my lead pastor and say, hey, I don't know if I'm clear on expectations here. Can you just clarify a few things for me? And maybe it's just a communication issue, that's okay. I had a staff member sit down and ask for some clarification on things. And I just said, would it help if we like intentionally met a little bit more often to stay in touch with each other? And they're like, yeah, that helped a ton. And we're now, a year or so into that process, and it's been awesome. Like, it's really helped that relationship with a staff member. So I would say chemistry can improve if the expectations are clear. But if it doesn't, then that incompatibility, like, it's going to be kind of vague and you're not going to know what it is or what's going on there. So there needs to be some questions asked that this could potentially be a major issue. It might not be, but I don't know. Del, you have seen some pretty unhealthy staff cultures in your past. How do you make sure this pastor is not simply firing somebody because he's irritated?
Yeah, for sure. I think, first of all, can we just own the fact sometimes people are exhausting? Like, let's just sit in that. Like, some people are just exhausting. I had
musicians especially, am I right?
I mean, I wasn't going to throw your previous under the cell, but I mean, I had a worship leader under me, man. He was exhausting. And I was oftentimes more busy cleaning up the mess that he made with congregants and staff. On the whole, there wouldn't have been like a thing that you could point to let him go. But philosophy of ministry was way different. A couple of things, unfortunately, it seems like this pastor's already beyond. I think this is a good practical thing for us pastors. Whenever you're looking at hiring to interview a church, always get your philosophy of ministry out there. Ask what the philosophy of the ministry of the church is. Because if you would have asked what the philosophy of the ministry of the church was, and you agreed with that, once you're on staff out there, when you find out his philosophy of ministry, you now have an objective thing to point to. Does that make sense? Instead of saying, well, we just operate differently. But I get it, man. His tired attitude, that is totally understandable. I've lost sleep because of worship guys under me, and I get it. But at the same time, you have to separate like how you feel emotionally with the fatigue with his observable behavior. In the most toxic environments I've seen where pastors keep a record of wrongs in their desk drawer. I'm not saying that we should be ignorant of what's going on, but I also think, like, if he made this congregant upset, if he said something inappropriate to this worship leader, if he did you definitely need to take note of those things, especially as his boss. It sounds like he's not up for corrective conversation. It sounds like he pushes back on that. So you're kind of in a place where, unfortunately, you probably need to keep some specific examples just for your next elder meeting or deacon, whatever context you're in. I think, the 3 R's are important when you're writing down these examples. What was requested? How did he respond? Was the expectation reasonable? Those like, write those down. And then on the end, you follow through with the 3 R's with, say, hey, how was it handled disagreeably? Or did he say, yeah, I got it? Or is he following through? those are just really good ways to call back with the 3 R's when you're writing down these examples. And which I would appreciate what this guy's doing. This would be the advice that I would already be giving, but he's doing it. And that is seek counsel outside of his current little sphere. Because, and I will say sometimes it's even good to seek the advice of pastors you don't know. Because I'm going to be honest, man, if Andrew's got a staff member, he calls me up, hey man, this guy's going at, I'm going to naturally defend my buddy. You know what I'm saying?
You're on Team Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so I think getting a pastor, I had to do this, man. I went to a pastor in my community who I respected, but I didn't know well. I confided into him. He was able to push back at me some, and he was able to help me really fight for what was really going on. Because this is your current church. You're called to steward it. So we don't steward through good vibes, right? We steward through objective reality. So having a pastor who can help cut through that is monumental. That's worth its weight in gold. So get that outside counsel, which it seems like he's doing. I know that Jeff's going to come in doing the low blows at his heart because he's really good at doing this. I'm going to save that for him. But if the volunteers are frustrated, then I think that does indicate to you something, that there is maybe something else besides a chemistry issue. If you have multiple volunteers that are frustrated, I think that the way I would encourage this guy to maybe reframe his thinking isn't just it's a chemistry and philosophy issue between me and him, because that makes a me and him thing. What we're really trying to see is he compatible with the church? I mean, I was at church one time and he was not under me. He was more on the org chart beside me, but he was a worship leader, and everything he had to do seemed like it had to be like on the cover of CCM magazine or something. And it got in the way of leading volunteers, because sometimes perfection gets in the way of a lot of things. And that was ultimately his downfall. Like, he had to, man, if those pads weren't going, that click wasn't perfect, he would just yell at his volunteers. So it was a philosophy, it was a chemistry issue. But, you've been there 8 months. One thing I want to know that we don't know is, what was the relationship between him and the previous pastor? If you have the ability to call that pastor, give him a call. If he's like, man, yeah, we were boys. We hung out, man. We went to see Spider-Man together or whatever. I think one of the things that I would just go ahead and maybe own is, man, the worship pastor might be in his own grief cycle. I mean, this is people are people. And when someone you really like leaves, especially if this was a long tenured pastor ahead of him, no one's going to do it as good as the previous pastor. So there's some empathy that goes in there. Frustration is an invitation to sanctification. So like, I think that it's a good pause right there to say, hey, let me see what may be going on in this guy's life. Maybe he's going on in grief, or if he's married, maybe things aren't good at home and he doesn't feel like he has any control or authority there. So he's going to wield that in a toxic way at church. There's a lot of things.
Yeah, or did he want to be the lead pastor?
Yeah, that's another thing, which is another.
Or did he want a different candidate?
There you go.
All those,
yeah. So which immediately throws him into a different type of grief cycle. I mean, grief and frustration is a very nuanced thing to deal with in somebody. And I would just be, when I read this, it really helped me out. Frustration is just another word for anger. So we just need to call it what it is. So if you're frustrated, this guy, let's just say you're angry. It might be a toned down version, but it's on the spectrum, whatever. But there's still he may be in a grief cycle. But last couple things I would just say is, like we talked about, do your research, find out some specific examples of how he's frustrating your volunteers. I wouldn't go around looking like you're trying to do a mutiny. Hey, I got my little thing, right? Tell me what he did to you. I got to write a verbatim, because what you'll be tempted to do is to weaponize their complaints. You're not doing this to weaponize anything. You're doing this hopefully because you love this church and you want to be able to lead it well. And you're just trying to make sure that this guy is a team player, that he's coachable, but also to make sure he's not going through something. Sometimes they really are going. I know a lot of people who failed at ministry because they were trying to fake it till they make it. But when you fake it, sometimes it comes across not authentic. Sometimes it comes across as harsh. That's not necessarily always the best mantra in ministry. So if he's not confronted on this ultimately, then you really don't have a right to be surprised if he continues. You're going to have to be courageous. You got to do Matthew 18, right? 1-on-1. And then you may have to take an elder And then if it continues, you may have to do another thing. But I think it's important that we're not just going to fire him because, he failed some test that he didn't know he was taking. You have to really do some homework because he's part of your congregate. I mean, here's the reality. You ever been frustrated with your congregants? He's one of your congregants. So you have to remember you're still his spiritual authority. So yes, he's employed. There is a level of responsibility. There's a level of accountability there. But at the same time, you're still responsible for him. So I think so let's just punch that forward and I'll hand off to Jeff. Let's just say he's had these conversations. Okay. The differences are absolutely real. And he's just convinced this is not going to work long term. Jeff, what do you think he should do from this point?
I mean, I know, to go back to what you were saying, I will say yes, this person is a congregant and a staff member, but outside of you, this is the congregant / staff member that gets the most face time on the platform.
You're right.
So the worship leader does have like a weird, probably unrealistic amount of like influence because people see them all the time. But yeah, so let's say you have the conversation and it's like you as a senior pastor have decided, and I've been on both sides of this now. I'm sure that I was this guy to a previous senior pastor because I was young and thought all my ideas were great and wanted to push back on everything he had to say. And so I remember one meeting, him looking at me and being like, you don't have to be the authority on this here. Like there's a team of people.
Ouch.
And he meant that like in a kind way, but because I was in such an immature place, I took that in the most offensive way I could take it. And so that pastor and I reconciled and we worked through, and I worked there for quite a while. But yeah, I would say once you make the decision, obviously it has to be something like insubordination. Everybody said you can't just fire somebody because the vibes are bad. And so if you're listening to this and you're in a church where you have staff and you're like, we don't have any kind of like employment policies or anything, get some. Start working on them now because this is the situation where you're going to want to have them. I would just make sure that you follow them all because from the way I read this situation, it sounds like this person is going to be, if this is their MO, they're going to be resistant to even getting fired too. So you're going to want to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. I would make sure you're following all your policies. Definitely get the elders involved, assuming you have elders or deacons or some kind of committee, whoever else. It can't just be you against him. You're also going to have to be in prayer a lot because this person is probably going to talk to his worship team members, even if somebody in that church is his ally, somebody in that church is his friend, and he's going to talk to them, and you are on the precipice of seeds of division being sown. And so you need to pray a lot about that because you really can't control it fully. You can try, but then it can devolve into just your word against his. And you've only been there 8 months, and that's not very long in the big scheme of things, which, Andrew said before we were recording, it's really not your church yet. A lot of people don't even see you as their pastor yet at 8 months. So I would be cautious and careful, but also decisive. Don't let this drag out forever. I would definitely, determine beforehand what the last date is going to be. If you have a policy of severance and benefits and all that stuff, make sure that all that is in a row when you have the sit down conversation. Be honest. Do not give in to the temptation to use your words to cut this person. Just don't do it. And be kind to them, but also be direct. The final meeting, the decision's already been made. We're not debating the decision. That's already done. So we're just having a conversation about what we're going to do going forward. I'm assuming at this point, you've already had the kind of ultimatum conversation. Like if this doesn't change, then we are going to have to go different directions. Now we're meeting again saying, hey, it hasn't changed in the timeline we said we were going to agree to. And so now we are going to go in a different direction. I will say this from experience. Here is what not to do. Do not fail to communicate to the congregation. Bring that person up on the platform to lead worship at a service where they know it's their last Sunday, but nobody else knows. And then lead all the songs and then make an announcement. And here's what happened to me. So I had to lead all the songs knowing that there were these very unhealthy meetings that were happening.
Dang.
In my situation, it was an interim thing where I got told one thing and then I was there for 2 years and then the rug got completely pulled out from under me. And it's like, that's my church hurt story, And so the elders who were probably unqualified to be elders stood up on the platform and said, we want to honor, this person, me, and we want to, and it was Christmas. I think it was that Sunday was Christmas Day. So we were having church on Christmas Day. So I'm standing up there on Christmas Day and we want to honor Jeff. And here's a $500 check to say thank you for your service, blah, blah, blah. And a month later, after my termination was done and I was supposed to get my $500 severance, they were like, oh, no, that was that check we gave you on Christmas on the stage in front of everybody. But on the check in the memo, it said Merry Christmas. It didn't say severance. It didn't say. So it just added salt to the wound. So don't do stuff like that. Don't try to make it look like everything is great. Get up, maybe have a members meeting and say, this is what's happening. I regret that this is happening, but this is what needs to happen. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Me and the elders are available. Over communicate. I'm not saying you need to make an announcement on the live stream in the middle of service while the guy's on the platform. Probably not. I don't know what you guys think, but I probably would, after the decision is made, he probably wouldn't lead worship anymore. The order would probably be final meeting with him. He's quote unquote fired. The next time there's a church gathering, we're announcing it and opening it up for questions so that there isn't that weird in-between time of he's kind of fired, but he's also leading worship, because you're basically asking the guy to lie in front of God and the congregation at that point and pretend that everything's okay when it's not. So that's kind of where I would leave it. I would want to make sure that there is, yes, it will be an awkward Sunday, but it won't be worse than the gossip that happens when you do it the other way.
I think we need to kind of ask, is chemistry enough of a reason to fire someone? Hey, this isn't someone I want to hang out with. And that's not what I'm accusing this poster of saying, but it's a real question. It's like, how much of this is just working chemistry? How many clear conversations should happen before there's termination? Like if it's like, hey, I told him months ago, like I wasn't vibing and things haven't improved. Well, does he know that things haven't improved? Like there should be some kind of like an improvement plan or a regular check-in. Does a philosophy of ministry disagreement belong on an improvement plan? Or is it just like, this is simply incompatible, we're not gonna change this? And how much weight do you put on volunteers when they're complaining, when they're basically saying what you want to say because it's backing up what you're already thinking? So there's a lot. How long has this guy been on staff? You're only there 8 months. Also, another question that I would have is, hey, when you were interviewing, did the idea of staff change never come up? Like in general, this is something that pastors deal with. So did you never think when you were getting hired that this might become an issue?
This is an argument for the way to operate for churches, that when the lead pastor changes, everybody tenders resignation.
Yeah, and whether or not he accepts it, who knows?
Whether or not he accepts it or not is up to him. And I mean, I know that sounds harsh and mean, but I just think, man, that is better than 8 months later having this just fester.
I am here because I knew that when my previous senior pastor retired, it wouldn't have made sense for me to stay on without him. And he and I we were close, but we weren't like, he was in his late 60s. We weren't like best buddies, but it was a situation where I knew that my role was so closely tied to him that it would not make sense for the next guy for me to be there. So I think there's a lot of questions, but it's like, if this is a personality issue, well, then you can work on a relationship. If it's a behavior issue, well, that's a different thing. But if it's the philosophy of ministry, I think you need to determine whether genuine alignment is even possible. But also something that I really think that needs to be brought up is there are not worship leaders growing on trees. I don't know if maybe it's just my context is different than it used to be when I was at big, cool churches compared to being at a local neighborhood church. Unless you have the next worship leader lined up, you might be in limbo for the next 6 months trying to find the next person. I mean, there's not just like a plethora or an overflow of gifted people in both leading worship and pastoring a congregation sitting around looking and waiting to do both.
Andrew, and there's a deeper conversation here about what the role of a worship pastor versus worship leader is. And
yes.
And maybe that's where they're differing. Maybe one thinks one way and one the other. But you're right. The unicorn of somebody who's administratively gifted enough to run a 130-person worship team is going to be decently, need to be organized, and also musically talented is not every person. And in this situation, this pastor might need to let go of, let's say this guy's a very, very good musician and leads a very good team or band or whatever. Are you willing to go for a year or two with just like acoustic and piano or something? Are you willing to go? Are you willing to bring in some college kid who's very musically gifted but is terrible at organization and have to like hold his hand to do that, or bring on an elder or like more of an executive pastor to oversee that? Is this guy full time, part time? We don't know the answer to that question. So I think
it's going to be a good 6 months of limbo if you want if you want a grown up in this role.
Yes,
it's not gonna and that's the other question is if you have somebody lined up from a previous church or whatever who you would like, oh man, I could work so well with this person. Well, that's another issue altogether if you just want to replace the one guy for somebody else that you know. But I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered and addressed before pulling this trigger. So before we talk about another worship leader who's great on Sundays and creating some headaches during the week, let's talk about a worship leader's favorite thing besides changing keys midway through rehearsal. Delmar, will you tell us about church merch?
I would love to tell you about church merch because
merch for your church?
I can't tell you how many times that I get a shirt from a conference or a church and I'm like, oh, great. This is a cut your grass shirt, paint the house shirt. That's not what these shirts are when you get them. I mean, you can if you want to, but these are the shirts that you want to wear in public. They fit like Tim's shirts fit him, okay? And if you're watching right now, just
a little
know
tighter in the chest and arms and loose in the belly. That's what you want.
Yeah. And if you're a big guy, it'll pull you in, make you look tough. I don't want to oversell it, but seriously, these shirts are premium made. They are bound to a mission because every time you buy these shirts, they also have a "Can I Pray for You" mission that's going on. Thousands of prayers are going out. It is amazing. Matter of fact, even if you don't buy the shirts, which I think you should at least check out that going on Facebook. It's like a movement. But just to go ahead and say, it's not just shirts. They will put your logo, your branding, whatever you want on all kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen them screen print and Cricut and do all kind of, not Cricut, but the expensive stuff. All right. For example, we're definitely not wanting you to have to Cricut your own stuff, but I've seen their logo on JBL speakers, AirPods. I mean, they'll do anything. So check them out. Other churches in the community, you will get the question, where are you getting your shirts? These don't look like the secretary made them, and that's what you want. So check them out. Church merch for your church.
Timmy, why don't you tell us about what is happening at Preach 26?
Well, we talk about this a lot, guys. Ministry can be lonely. It can be isolating. That's why partnering with Preach 26 has been so natural from us. Maybe you recently got an email from them. I know I did. It's a conference for pastors and ministry leaders. It's happening in just a couple of months, October 6th through the 8th in the Woodlands, Texas. You get to be in the room with pastors navigating the same challenges while also learning from some great leaders like Dane Ortland, Brian McCormick, Hakeem Bradley. There's going to be more. Purchase of your ticket is going to enter you into something really, really sweet. It's a giveaway for a 3-night vacation for you and Andrew, or +1. You can decide on that, at Jackson Lake Lodge in Wyoming. And just imagine a weekend getaway, just you and Andrew, or a different +1. Seats are capped to keep the environment intimate. So you're going to want to grab your spot today, preach26.com. Use the code PASTORPOD at the checkout. You get your name entered twice in all the giveaways throughout the conference, including the one-on-one trip with Andrew or a +1 to Wyoming. It's going to be awesome. Preach26.com, PastorPod.
Listen, I don't even know if I can go to Wyoming. I'm a very busy guy, but shoot the invite. We'll see what happens. Here is our second question. It says, looking for some advice from other church leaders and staff. We are a medium-sized church with a mix of full and part-time staff, and we're navigating a situation with a younger part-time worship/music staff member. They do a really good job in their primary role. They're well-liked, musically gifted, lead worship in a way that fits our church well, and overall have very few concerns with the direction they're taking things on Sunday. There's a lot we genuinely appreciate about them. The challenge is more on the staff and leadership side. Because their position is part-time, they seem to view their responsibilities primarily around what happens on Sunday. There isn't much initiative when it comes to staff communication, meetings planning, or being involved with the broader team. We understand that part-time means there are limits to availability, but the lack of communication and leadership is starting to affect the people they're responsible for leading. We've talked with them about it and tried to encourage them, but we're still seeing some of the same patterns. The tricky part is that they're young, we really value them, and we want to help them grow rather than make this bigger than it needs to be. At the same time, we don't want part-time to mean there are no expectations for communication and leadership. How do you approach this? Would you set clear expectations and hold them accountable, or give more time and coaching? How have you handled similar situations with younger part-time ministry leaders? I'd love to hear what has worked well for others. I think this is a much easier situation to deal with than the other question because, one, when I hear young leader who's good at the main thing they were hired to do, I'm like, okay, well then everything else is going to work out. They lead people well. People like them. The church likes the direction. The problem is about the stuff that nobody except for the staff and a few volunteers get to see: the emails, meetings, plannings, communication, follow up with volunteer. So my initial instinct is, before we call this a character problem or a failure in leadership, I think we should see the job description. Because if it says, hey, you're a part-time leader, you're here 15 hours a week, but you're planning a Sunday service for 10 hours, well, that gives you 5 hours a week to do the other stuff. Or if it just says, hey, you're being paid for 15 hours a week, they might be putting all those 15 hours into Sunday mornings. They don't have time to do the other stuff as far as they are concerned. So I would start with the number of hours that they're actually paid. I would remind them that part-time ministry is still ministry employment, but I've always told my part-timers, listen, part-time means part-time. Don't give the church full-time work for part-time pay, because then there's no reason for them to ever bump you up to full-time pay. You can't pay someone for 12 hours and expect 25 out of them, especially someone who's younger, who may be in school and has other things going on and might have another job. I think communication and leadership are absolutely necessary, but those should be explicit. Whatever you are expecting needs to be clearly communicated. I think young leaders may not understand that the invisible staff expectations that exist around church staffs. And so you kind of need to over communicate what is being seen or how they are being perceived. If Sunday execution is strong, I think there's a lot worth developing in this person. I don't know who this person is, but you do. So take that for what it's worth. Jeffrey, you serve in a smaller church where you have part and full-time people. How do you set meaningful expectations without turning a part-time employee into a very, very poorly paid full-time employee?
One thing I would say about this particular situation, and I think to answer the question you just asked, basically all the things you said, I mean, very, very clear communication and expectations. That's what I see missing, is like, this sounds honestly more like an indictment of the leadership that's writing this question than it does of the young leader, because you're basically like, why doesn't he know what we didn't tell him? So I would maybe sit down with him.
Why does the 20-year-old not know how church has been done for the past 80 years?
Well, and think about the leadership development opportunity you have. Take this 20-year-old and sit down and go, hey, look, there are some things that we didn't tell you that we expected out of you, and we would love to sit down with you and have you help us develop a job description for the role that you're filling. And ask this person, what are your dreams for worship ministry in our church? What do you want to see? And maybe they'll say, I want to develop bands, or I want to develop more leaders. And then you can go, okay, here's how we're going to help you do that. Because if they're already good at the quote unquote on stage stuff, imagine how much better the worship ministry of the church could be if all the other non-stage stuff was executed really well as well. Now, here's another thing. If they're a younger worship leader, I'm going to assume that they're fairly new to the church, literally because they are young. And so that might mean that the church had a previous worship leader who had a lot more experience. And here's what I know as a person who happens to have a lot of worship leading experience in the last 20 years. I am a lot faster at preparation than I used to be, because I've been playing my instrument for a very long time. And I could put a set list together in my sleep if I wanted to, almost to a fault where I could be like lazy about it, because I know how keys work together and things flow, and I could read this psalm in front of this song. Like, I could, if you asked me to do it right now, I could probably do it in like 10 minutes. So when someone gets very experienced and the church gets used to that kind of leader who can do things quickly and still have time for the leadership administrative side of things, and then they switch to a younger worship leader who's very musically talented but hasn't developed all those skills, because musical preparation, worship leading preparation is just like preaching prep. It compounds over time. You get better and better at it over time, and you just get faster at preparing for it. So again, I would just say, like, take that into consideration. Did you have a previous worship leader who is very experienced and who over the course of 10 years learned how to handle all that stuff? And now you've got someone new who is good musically but doesn't know about sending emails or sending out PCO invites on time and all that stuff. That sounds like a coaching opportunity. So again, I would count the hours that if they're paid for 15 hours, see how many hours are taken on a Sunday. You'll be surprised, between rehearsal and service and cleanup, you're probably going to burn through half those hours just on Sunday morning. And then if you have like a staff meeting you're expecting them to be at, that should be in the hours. All those things should be in the hours. And also you need to ask them, hey, are you spending time like practicing your instrument? If you play guitar, do you practice guitar an hour or two a week at least? On top of rehearsal is another paid time. The time they spend picking the songs, which probably takes them longer than it will in a few years. All of that stuff counts. And so a lot of times churches it's similar to how, we treat senior pastors with you only work on Sundays because that's when I see you preaching thing. It's a very similar thing. You think this person's a musician, so they already know how to play music, so therefore they just get up on Sunday and they just do it. No, if they're doing it well and they're leading other people into doing it, they're going to have to prepare themselves. To run a rehearsal, you have to be the most well-versed person on the songs for that week. If you're the worship leader, you have to know those songs front and back to front, and be able to communicate that with other people. And that takes time to learn how to communicate. And that means preparation time. They got to print chord charts, or they got to get iPads set up, or microphones, or what, all that stuff is included. And so I think just clearly understanding where those hours are going, and then clearly communicating what your expectations are. For example, maybe do you have staff policies around how long it should take you to respond to emails or text messages? How many staff meetings are you expected to be at? How far in advance? Because I'll tell you, I fall into this rut. I'll get to the point where I'm picking songs on the Thursday before Sunday. And that's like, I don't like that. And if you don't manage a younger person who's very creative, they'll be showing up on Sunday morning going, what do you guys feel like playing? And they might even spiritualize it and say the Holy Spirit is the Holy Spirit can lead you 2 weeks beforehand too. All right. So what are your expectations for that? And hold them to that. And then also help them realize that part of what they're doing is leading volunteers. And so maybe they're very young, maybe all their volunteers are older than them, but they can begin to exercise some leadership and checking in on those volunteers. Is there anything you need? I will say, as a senior pastor now, one of the things you kind of can look over is the equipment that's required for worship teams. And a lot of times, especially for whatever reason, drummers end up buying a lot of their own very expensive equipment and we don't even notice. Or your guitar players, they need strings, they need picks. All of that stuff is going to take hours for this young person to help your worship team manage. And you need to be aware that those are not just throwaway hours. So again, clear expectations, listen to this young person. If you need 20 hours of work a week, then you better budget for 20 hours of work a week. So part-time doesn't mean that the job is not that important. It just means that there's not as many paid hours budgeted for it. So Tim, this sounds like a young leader who might just need some coaching. You've done a lot of that in your day. How would you help develop them? And before you answer, I'm going to pull a worship leader move and leave unexpectedly. I got to go.
Bye, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm going to assume here that there are a few more hours. Right? We've already established, make sure that the right number of hours are being given for this job. So let's just assume he's got a few more hours in the tank. So let's go with that. I think we can all agree this is the person we want on our team. Like, this is exactly who we are called to lead, to pour into, to invest in. They've got like some of those intangibles, right? Some of those things that have taken years. They've got the gifting. Sounds like they have the credibility. People genuinely enjoy being around this person. He's doing a great job on Sunday mornings. So we've got some potential administrative and communication skills that need to be taught. Great. We could these are things we can absolutely do. Like I always say, I would rather tame a lion than have to wake up a sleeping cat. It sounds like this guy's got the chops to do the job. So let's hone it in. All right. Here are some things that also need to get done, and be really, really clear. Don't be vague. Don't say, I need better communication from you. That's a dumb sentence. I would say, hey, I'm expecting at least one email per week to your team, right? Whatever that specific thing is, make it a checklist for them so they know, oh, got it. Yeah. Every Tuesday, I got to send an email to my team and check in on them, right? Just as their leader, I need to make sure they're doing okay. If you have a specific day in mind where the volunteer schedule is typically posted, make sure they know, hey, every Tuesday, I'm going to have that volunteer schedule posted. This is a big one for me. We have communicated this with all of our staff. We have a 24-hour window. We have a staff group chat. The expectation is you respond within 24 hours. And if it's urgent, you might need to respond a little bit faster. Not an email. We have a staff separate group chat. And I've told highlight this, pin this. We put it in Google Chat. Just make this a separate thing. And you just know when this comes through, just glance at it. If it's urgent, respond, right? Those things need to be communicated. Otherwise, people don't know what they don't know. This one's been big for me in developing younger leaders. You might need to take some time here, and that's okay. You might need to intentionally say, hey, can we grab lunch once a week? I'd love to sit down with you. I would love to hear how you are doing. I get you want to get them better at their job. But I think one of the ways to get someone better at their job is to get to know who they are as a person and to make sure they know you care for them as a person, because then they're probably going to want to do a little bit better of a job because they're working for someone that actually cares for them. So when they're doing something awesome, tell them, And don't just tell them in private. Like at a staff meeting, bring it up. Like, I saw this person do something awesome yesterday, and I just got to give them a shout out. And we do annual reviews at Lakeview, but I would say but it's not just that. We also do monthly check-ins. So give them a goal. Hey, within the next 30 days, we're going to check in. I'd love to see the progress on this. Have those meetings been set? Have you been sending out those weekly emails like we talked about? Did you get, we have we try to stay, I think we try to stay like 4 to 6 weeks ahead in our worship planning session. So like, has music been selected for the next 6 weeks? Great. Have volunteers been selected? And then, as you check in on that, just pull up Planning Center, right? Make sure the people have been selected, the songs have been selected. And if there is like a continual bar that's just not being met, then there needs to be some accountability, right? Open up the job description. Here's what this requires. We gave you 20 hours a week. I had you track hours last week. You told me it took 14 to do Sunday. So where are the other 6 hours going? That should be communication and administrative. And then equip them. What do you need? Need a better laptop? You have terrible internet, right? Like, help them out. Make sure they can get the job done that you've asked them to do. Here's what improvement looks like. And then after 60 days, 90 days, right? Reassess. And then what needs to happen next? I'm not firing a 23-year-old because they don't know how to function on a ministry staff if no one's ever taught them how to function on a ministry staff. Like, that is your job, ministry leader. Like, help them to understand how to function. Del, what is the line here between, and I'm probably going to lean on grace more often than not, but there's got to be a line, right? What's the line here between giving a young leader grace and accidentally enabling immaturity?
Man, that's loaded, because I think one of the things that I've seen is that grace and accountability, they're not the opposites, right? Like, sometimes accountability is giving someone grace, and if they've done what you said and set this young guy up, with some very tangible, objective things. We need you to respond to this by 24 hours, log your hours. If they've not done that, that's actually advantage. And let me qualify that, because now you've kind of purchased yourself a coaching opportunity. Does that make sense? Young leaders, they need room to fail, but they also need people who are willing to tell them when they're failing. I think the most horrible leaders will create room to fail and then not follow up. Like, then that becomes like living with a psychopath. Okay, don't be a psychopath. They need to have room, and then they need us to be courageous and thought through and bring what we know about ministry to them. Now, I'll say this, and this is something that it took me a while to catch this, because I tend to lean more towards grace as well. So sometimes when you're having these conversations, if you take a few notes, it helps you get outside of yourself. If you can do that in a way that doesn't look like you're grading their response, because what you're really looking for isn't, okay, I'm writing down the hours. What you're looking for is this: can they respond to coaching? Right? That's really important. Like, nobody's going to be perfect. I've not met the leader who is both creatively perfect and administratively perfect. That is a rare horse. Okay. So like, what we're trying to find is, can they be coached? So if sounds like they're a little weaker on the administrative side, say, hey, listen, one thing that was taught to me, and I think this is really good. It's a line. It's this: are you open to an observation? That's a really good entrance ramp for a coach. Are you open to an observation? If they say, sure, give them your feedback, and then just wait. And sometimes you might have to sit in silence for a couple of seconds, but if they say, well, I want to get better, well, that's encouraging. If they start coming up with a litany of excuses of why they can't do it, or why you just don't operate the way I do, well, that could be a character thing, or it could be what Jeff was saying. Maybe we need to pay them for more hours. Because young people, oftentimes, if they're fast, especially with worship, it can look good, but it can be sloppy, right? Meaning other people get hurt. If you want it more thoughtful and planned out for a young person, sometimes that is just going to take more time. It is not without the realm to think they're throwing a lot of these hours into Sunday. And we're looking at it through 20 years in the ministry lenses, and they're looking at it through 2 years in the ministry lenses. And that's like expecting someone who just started running yesterday to run a 5K. Like, we need to help and coach them there. So yes, that accountability and asking if you can have an observation, giving them some points that they can fail, but more importantly, they can succeed at. Because the hope is you get to circle back around to those things later and be like, hey man, I just want to celebrate you for a second. Like, you responded to the thing. That's awesome. That's progress, because we want to be able to celebrate. Man, if they're a young guy, if they're part-time, if your church can't afford a full-time, chances are you're only going to have them for a season because they're going to get up, they're going to grow, they're going to need full-time employment. But wow, what an opportunity for you to be a part of that season. And maybe, yeah, go ahead, bud.
I've got former interns that are at way bigger and cooler churches than I will ever touch again in my career. And they go back like the summer that they were the youth worship intern for a youth group of 100 kids in Texas, and will still message me about, something that we did then. And if you are hiring someone who is, their trajectory is going straight up, you get to be a teaching hospital. And it's
yes,
you're going to play a story in their career and in their ministry. And the conversations that you have over these lunches and these meetings are going to resonate with them way more than the, hey, you made you loaded ProPresenter well and you got your planning center turned in on time. Like, really pour into this person.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I kind of look at people who work under you in a sense of how my children are. I want my children to be more successful than me. Air quotes, right? I want them to go further. So when someone who was under my leadership, who I got to pour into and disciple and grow, when they launch out there, and I've got a couple just like you, Andrew, who are just like doing amazing things, I'm genuinely proud because I'm very aware that part of my ministry on this earth probably doesn't even have anything to do with my ministry and everybody who's under my ministry. Is maybe that one or two people who I got to disciple who go and do amazing things. And how blessed are you that you might have this little worship guy sitting under you if you just say, hey, I'm going to really dig into this. I'm going to Paul and Timothy this thing instead of, just keeping it business. You have an opportunity and punch it out 10 years. Do you want to be the person who lose my contact, or do you want to be the person who can call you 10 years from now and say, hey, you've been doing this for 30, 40 years and I trust you. Can I lean on you? Man, lean into that. So, but that's 10 years from now. Right now we're talking about like the microcosm. So I think one of the things that's important, and Andrew, I'd like to throw this to you. Like a lot of churches lean into a 45 or 90-day development plan because if you don't have structure, how do you grow? So is there a way that you would provide maybe some structure for this young man and bring to the team to help get over this slump?
I'd say let's sit down and talk about, the hours that we have that we can afford to pay you for, and acknowledge, hey, this is an important job. This is a job that many churches are paying a full-time salary with benefits and matching 401k and all that stuff for. So know that you are in a big role, but we have 15 hours a week we're paying for right now because that's what we can afford at the rate that we think that you are worth hourly. So what does your week look like? And I'd break it down like, okay, so if you're running a rehearsal and you're here Sunday morning, so that let's call that a combined 5 or 6 hours. And then like Jeff was saying, you need some time to play over and pick songs yourself so that you can be well-versed in them before the rehearsal. So let's call that 3 hours. So, I would sit down with like a kind of like a pie chart to like budget the time in the staff and be like, okay, so we need these communication things happening throughout the week. You have X number of hours that aren't being used, with the guitar strapped on or behind the keyboard. So in those times, we need these however many things done. And I would try to identify 2 or 3 non-negotiables instead of here's 12 things we need. I'd be like, hey, these are the staff meetings that we need you to be at. We know that because of your school schedule or because of your other job, you can't be at every week, but this is the one big one a month. We need you to be at this one. Or we can, find a day that's going to work for you to be at this one, but we need you to be at this one specific meeting. We need you to respond to staff communications within one day. Like I know I see you scrolling through your phone all the time when we're talking anyway. So I need you to respond to an email or a text in the staff thread or whatever it is within X number of hours. And maybe 24 is the fair number, maybe 6 or 12. I don't know. That's just a conversation that you're going to need to have. And then I need you to publish the schedule at least 3 weeks in advance. So I would not overwhelm them with 12 or 15 expectations, like things that need to be met. But hey, here's the real low-hanging fruit. So let's budget our time. Let's pick a few things that we know we can get you to do. And then each meeting, I would start with what this person did well. What's working, what are people seeing, how are people responding? And then after we celebrate the win, then go with, hey, where are you getting stuck? What communication did you miss? What more do you need from me? And then follow up regularly. Like, is this realistic? Is it realistic that we are expecting you to do all of this in 15 hours? And if not, what can we pull back? But when we have agreed to this job description in these number of hours, we need to accomplish these things in this number of hours. And we can reevaluate as needed. And hopefully, as maturity grows, we can either add more hours on. But really, like you said, Del, you're probably training this person up to be somebody else's great full-time employee in the future. And so you need to kind of hold them with open hands because, like we said earlier, this gifted worship leaders aren't just growing on trees. You're not going to find these people everywhere. And so you are setting up their church work experience for the next 30 or 40 years, hopefully. So yes, give them the tools they need and, make sure that you are willing to have the difficult conversations, but celebrate the growth and expect growth and cultivate growth. This is such a weird analogy, but I had a person in my church at one point who was about to hit 40 and he had just married a 19-year-old and things were not going well. And he came to me with this, hey, things are not going well, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of wanted me to say, well, you're exactly right. She should be doing X, Y, and Z. And I looked at him and I said, did you really marry a teenager? And now you're complaining about her being immature? Like, dude, what? Duh. Of course that's going to happen. If you hire an immature person, you can't complain about immaturity. If you hire someone who's not mature, it's because you see something that can be there. And it's your job to help cultivate that and help grow that person and to get the maturity out of them. And so I don't see any of this as a failure of leadership. I see this as way to go leadership for recognizing natural talent, calling, and ability. And now you get to hone it because calling is something that also doesn't grow on trees. You can't just go pick up someone who's called. You have to find the person that God has uniquely called and equipped. But now you get to do how does this actually work in a vocation? So there's a lot of coaching, there's a lot of follow-up, but I also think there needs to be a lot of grace in celebrating this person. So I think both of these questions that we have today, there's two different versions of the same leadership issue. And now that Jeff is not here, we can all say, listen, this is what you deal with when you deal with talented musicians. Talented musicians are going to push back, especially on a more academic preacher type. That's probably why God has called us to work together so many times so that we have different sides of the same coin. In the first question, we have a lead pastor that may have a staff member who is talented but no longer aligned. And then in question 2, we have a staff member who appears aligned but still needs that maturing and that development. Our job as pastors is to figure out which problems we actually have and which ones we're actually addressing, and not to call someone to chemistry when the issue is subordination, and not to call someone to maturity when the issue is really just unclear expectations. Don't call someone lazy because you're expecting 25 hours of work when you're only paying for 12, and don't say somebody is misaligned when you might just be hard to work with. I think we need to focus on the mission that God has entrusted to us and equip people to do their part in that mission. Clear expectations, honest conversations, and good coaching all are keys to decisive leadership. And that's something that God has called us to. So Del, before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can bring their own dysfunctional staff questions to vent anonymously.
You can vent anonymously at the Practically Pastoring Facebook community group. All right, we have around 1,400 members. And right now,
by the time this airs, we might have 1,500. We got a queue of people waiting to be approved. Lately. It's been crazy.
Yes. And the questions have been amazing. So I want to encourage you to jump in there and also let you know that's where the community starts. Okay. That's where it starts. It continues way outside that group. We've got friendships that have spurred on. If you are new to the group, new to listening, we have a Practically Pastoring conference every year where we get together and actually get to be face to face. But I would encourage you, go in there, interact. But if you have something you want to talk about ministry, post it. Post it anonymously is a way to let us know that this is something that you would like to have on the podcast, because there are quite a few comments sometimes. So when we see anonymous, it's a good way of like flagging it up so that way we can discuss it on here. But please join it. Feel free to reach out to us, and you can slide into Jeff's DMs anytime. He just loves talking to you in DMs.
He's a big fan. Hey, thank you again to Church Merch and Preach 26 for shirts, mugs, banners, promotional products, and more. Visit promotionsguy.com/churchmerch and head over to Preach 26 and use the code PastorPod at checkout to get your name entered twice in all the giveaways throughout the conference, including the Wyoming weekend getaway. For Tim, Dell, and Jeff, I am Andrew. This is Practically Pastoring, and we will see you next week.
See y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, fam.
Hey.